Good afternoon. It is 2:08 p.m. on Sunday, October 7th, 2018. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I didn't just get up exactly, although I did sleep pretty late. I was up pretty late, but also I think I may have a cold or allergies or something, and I'm just kind of So, I slept really late, and here I am. So, today's Sunday, though, and that means that I'm doing my rewatch of The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya with the 21st episode chronologically. It's gotten complicated now, but the episode entitled The Sigh of Haruhi Suzumiya, Part 2. And we begin this episode immediately where the other one left off, like mid-sentence. The part 1 ended with Mikuru saying, "Excuse me," and then this one begins with her asking the question that she was saying "excuse me" for. So it's just like right back to back, almost like it might have originally been intended to be like part of a longer special or episode or something, movie or something. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but so the gang is in the process now of making their movie for the arts festival, and we see Haruhi becoming increasingly, like, she's always kind of tyrannical and maniacal, but we see that kind of building. She is really enthusiastic about this project, and we see it even just, there's just small moments where, they're coming back from the mall where they got these models and everything, and Kyon notices her on the subway kind of just staring into space with this like imaginative smile on her face, and it's actually nicely subtle animation in the sense that I think it really conveys to us her mindset here, which is she's into this. She's really excited about doing this movie, and she's planning for it. She's thinking about it, even though from Kyon's perspective, everything is kind of scattershot and by the seat of her pants, and doesn't seem like there actually is much of a plan. It's just everything's kind of happening. She's making decisions on the spur of the moment. But what we get is, coming back from the mall, and Kyon is taking the models home, and then we get a conversation of him with his friend Taniguchi, who is sort of pressing him for information on what's going on, and also complaining about the arts festival. But there's kind of a crucial moment there where Taniguchi describes Kyon as the nice guy, and in particular describes that quality, like what he means by calling him the nice one is you'd stick with someone even as they were going to drive right off a cliff. And Kyon is kind of a little offended by that, but it's hard to argue because, what does he end up doing most of the time is going along with whatever Haruhi says. And so that's kind of in his head a little bit as we are developing this current arc of the story. Now, one of the things that I kind of want to talk about a little bit in this episode is that there are some things that are played comic in a way that feels a little bit off in today, and maybe difference in America versus Japan. But for example, like the gun models looking super realistic as opposed to looking more like an obvious toy, or having the little orange thing on the barrel that we have here in the United States, having them look real even if it's made very clear in the episode that they're BB guns. Or even just like little pellets. It's not it's not clear if it's BBs or maybe plastic pellets. I think BBs is the intended idea there, but just the idea of school kids carrying around these very realistic model guns is something that's a little bit it evokes some unpleasant concepts that I don't think the episode was really intending to do. It's just kind of an element of, it's, a Japanese story, and took place a few years ago, and the cultural consciousness of those things has changed somewhat since. And the other one, of course, is the fact that Haruhi's practice of forcing Mikuru to wear these really skimpy costumes and go out in public when she's clearly embarrassed, and then frequently forcing her to change those clothes. And it's mitigated perhaps a little bit by the fact that obviously Haruhi is not doing it out of her own, for her own sexual gratification, but it's still not cool. And one of the things that I'll say about that is that even though it has largely been played for laughs just because of the running gag of overhearing without seeing anything Mikuru's protests as Haruhi is demandingly forcing her to change into a skimpy costume, and the running gag of Kyon having to stand outside the room and everything, listening to that. And, of course, his own teenage boy conflict, in the sense that he understands that it's not really cool to be forcing Mikuru to wear stuff she's uncomfortable with, but also on a base level, and on a level that he's not really even very pleased with himself about, he thinks she looks really good in those costumes. And that produces a level of conflict there. But then, of course, that plays into the tension where Haruhi is jealous every time Kyon pays attention to Mikuru. So there's an interesting little circular mess of stuff there, right? Because Haruhi is forcing Mikuru to wear clothes that Kyon finds attractive, but then gets jealous if Kyon shows any interest. And it's all a bit muddled in there, and not muddled is the wrong word. It's complex. There's many layers of what's happening there, and they all are actually important. And what I'll say too is we haven't seen it yet, but Haruhi's treatment of Mikuru is something that will come up in a more serious way in this arc. It hasn't yet, but I was definitely thinking that as I watched this episode, that, it's in today's sort of social, political environment, pressuring women to do stuff they're uncomfortable with is harder to laugh off. I mean, even in different contexts like this. But anyway, we have the reveal of several elements from the student movie that they make and that we've seen. So we see her in the waitress outfit for the first time. And Haruhi can't even really explain why. Why a waitress? Why from the future? Why does it matter? But everyone in the room is kind of suddenly horrified when she reveals the cast list, and it has Koizumi as a teenage Esper, Mikuru as being from the future, and Nagato as an alien witch. And everyone's like, what? Because, of course, apparently without knowing, Haruhi has assigned everyone the role that they actually are, and everyone's a little bit alarmed by that. Koizumi continues to push his idea that doesn't matter, it's a coincidence, and that Haruhi actually is good at separating fantasy from reality, and his evidence of that is that there aren't more fantastical things in the world. That mostly the world doesn't have all of those things, and it's the ones that do exist are rare, because that's what Haruhi thinks, is that they exist but are rare. If they exist, they are rare, and so that's the way it is. And so his rationale is that if she were to really be losing the, unable to see the line between fantasy and reality, that would be demonstrated in the world. But we have Kyon increasingly concerned that her behavior in making the movie is going to be a problem for everyone. Primarily, inconvenience for him, but, embarrassment for Mikuru. So we see them go and film the commercials, and some of the fun in that is just seeing those from the other side. But having her constantly Mikuru having to change clothes, and the bunny outfit, the waitress outfit in public, and they go to the park, and there's filming some of the battle sequences. I'm gonna have to sneeze here in a second, I think. But in the other words, we're making the movie now. It seems unclear whether there's a script or not. She says there is, but wouldn't show it to anybody, claiming it's like, if I print it out and it got lost, it got leaked. That would be the worst thing ever. And there's some fun meta commentary in this too about just shooting whatever, and we'll put it all together in the editing, which is, of course, what Kyon complains about in the voiceover of the movie later. And also, there's some meta commentary about having concepts that don't really get explained, and Haruhi basically saying, it doesn't matter if we don't know the answer now, we'll figure out an answer as we go, and if we don't, we'll just ignore it. And we can definitely imagine that that's a complaint about various anime series, but anyway. So we don't necessarily have a lot of action in this episode, but we're definitely building, and what we're seeing is a progression of Haruhi getting more and more into this movie and more excited about it, and being increasingly demanding as the movie director. And the one moment that I'll kind of call attention to as being a bump in that progression is there's a weird moment when they're showing up to film on Saturday where Kyon has shown up before the target time of 9 a.m., but once again, because he's the last to arrive, she declares him late and therefore has to pay for lunch for everybody. And he kind of says, whatever, fine. There's a weird moment where Haruhi kind of notices that she and Kyon are dressed similarly. Like, it's not obvious that that's what's being depicted, but it seems clear to me that they're both kind of wearing a blue vest-like thing with light-colored shirt and sleeves underneath. And she doesn't really call attention to that, but she also does just react to his complaining with a bit of a conciliation to that of, she will pay for everybody's bus fare. And it seems like a reaction to his complaint. So it is, once again, like when she pulls the drink away from Mikuru, we have many signs that I think we're meant to see of Haruhi, despite being so dictatorial in many respects, obviously has feelings for Kyon that perhaps she herself does not fully understand and doesn't really know what to do with, right? And so she frequently, when her behavior becomes more anomalous, it's involving Kyon. Otherwise, she's going full speed ahead. And we remember all the way back to, the initial arc that this kind of all started because he suggested the idea of forming her own club. Anyway, we'll go ahead and leave it there for this episode, but in the next one, this arc kicks into high gear. So we'll see that next week on Sunday, and in the meantime, I will talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.